Hello and welcome to On the Right Track Career Stories, a video series and podcast about real people, their real careers, and real lives. I'm Jane Christopher, your host, and today I'm talking to Stephanie Wilson Chapin. She's a media executive and she's got some great stuff to share with us today. Hi, Stephanie. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks, Jane, so much for having me. It's such a pleasure.
Pleasure to see you. And let's just get right off to it. Tell
Okay.
us what you do.
Gosh. So the easiest way to describe what I do is if you happen to be Canadian, but even if you're not, if you watch any major television networks, here it happens to be CTV, a number of news networks. I work for a very big media company here. I have a sports network as part of my portfolio, TSN, in the States equivalent ESPN. And basically, I'm responsible for building all of the apps and websites and connected TV experiences, any digital experiences for all of those brands. So I like to say, if you interact with us, if you watch one of our TV channels, that isn't my team. That's the traditional side of the business. If you listen on the radio, also not my team, but everything else is. So my job is to create experiences for people when they interact with us on their laptop, on their phone, on their tablet, and that includes news, sports, lifestyle, entertainment, all kinds of different verticals. And the funny thing, and I know we're going to talk about journey today, I couldn't have even imagined my job because it didn't exist.
Yeah. I think that that's what our kids are going to see, our high school students.
Yeah. I think that, as I was thinking about what I wanted to do, I always thought I would become a broadcast journalist. I did from the time I was little. And of course, back then it meant TV or radio. And I had a wonderful mentor. I did do, so this was really important for my development. I did try to network with people who I thought did jobs that I wanted. And I tell you, honestly, everybody says yes. There's no one who really doesn't want to talk about themselves and share their story. I mean, here I am with Jane and I'm really enjoying it, but it's nothing to be fearful of. And so I had a wonderful mentor who said to me, look, as you think about university, I was thinking, do I need to go into journalism school? Like, do I need to do that? Should I do that from the beginning? What should I do? The advice he gave me was just go to school and take what you enjoy. Just whatever you enjoy. And if after that, after your first experience, your first 4 years, 3 or 4 years, you still are interested in journalism, great. Then you can think about maybe going to graduate journalism school or doing something more specialized. And so that's what I did. I did not go to journalism school right off the bat. Instead, I did a politics and history degree because I thought that would be a good background for a journalist. And then while I was at school, I discovered a TV show, a student-run volunteer TV show that gave me an amazing experience completely outside of academia. And that's when I really decided that sort of the media space was for me.
What did you do next after your history politics degree?
Yep. So I was able to, out of my extracurricular activity, put together a portfolio. I applied to graduate journalism schools. It was extremely competitive to get in. And here's where the networking thing is so super cool. I have a pretty cool story. So the man I went to talk to when I was 16 to say I want to become a broadcast journalist ended up being the acting chair of the journalism school that I applied to. And when he received my package, one of the most important things to them, and I think this is good for kids to know, one of the most important things wasn't necessarily marks, but it was a demonstrated interest in the profession. They did not want someone coming into journalism school because they didn't get into law school or they didn't get into teachers college. They wanted it to be clear that this was a student who really was passionate about the space.
Mm-hmm.
So because I'd spoken to him at 16,
Mm-hmm.
and because I had this portfolio of work, I obviously had a demonstrated interest for quite some time. And I think that was really what got me into the school.
Okay, can you talk a little bit more about how students can get into the space
Sure.
today's day?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think one of the most important things when it comes to media and journalism in particular is to experience it. And see if you like it. So if you have a school paper or an online website, or there's an opportunity to be a photographer for the yearbook or something media related, if you can actually find a way to experience that as a volunteer or an intern, I think it's incredibly beneficial because you get to discover whether or not you actually like it. As you graduate high school, there are certainly programs, college level programs, that are very specifically oriented to, media production, all kinds of specialized, really, I think, terrific college programs. Some of them you require a degree for, but some you don't. And I can tell you that, at least in my space, the experience, the portfolio of work, which is what those programs often do, they're incredibly practical. Having that portfolio as you move out into the world is really important, because I can't tell how good a journalist you're going to be if you've never actually tried to be one.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, if you're not entirely sure, as I said, the way that I did, you could head to university and do your first degree and decide if you're still interested.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's also very specialized and I think really cool stuff happening at the college level.
Okay, so Stephanie, you said that you knew that you wanted to go into this, but you were given advice to choose something more general towards your interests when you went to university. Would you have changed anything, maybe gone into journalism now that you're looking back? Like, would you have been specific at that stage, knowing what you knew?
No, no, I wouldn't have. And I'll tell you why. I think a lot of people think that they need to have, we talk a lot about vision, we talk a lot about goal setting. And I think that people think they must have exactly that role in mind in the future if they're going to be quote unquote successful.
Mm-hmm.
I disagree. I think that you need to stay open.
Mm-hmm.
There are many different routes the journey could go, and you don't want to miss something because you're so laser focused on the one direction you were going in. So, in my case, serendipitously, while I was at school, a group of students did a documentary, and they happened to interview a doctor and an architect who started a quote unquote internet company. Now, this is really dating myself, but honestly, nobody knew what that was.
Mm-hmm.
This is the mid 90s. And so they were looking for people to help them build, oh my gosh, help them build a website. And essentially, I was paid to be a human Google for a summer. There was no Google, there was no Yahoo. You had human beings who would search the internet. And in my case, it was to look for links to health websites to help build a library of
Mm-hmm.
health information. And when I started to do this and get online and really understand it, I loved it. And I thought, oh my God, if only I could do this all the time. And so a really wonderful teacher of mine at Ryerson, I'll never forget it. We sat down one day. He could tell that I was just sort of not feeling it. And I said, I just don't think I want to do this. I even had a couple of teachers who um, called ahead to CTV, ironically, and said, hey, we've got our top student here and she's ready to go. You're basically going to hire her. And when the teachers told me this, one of them, I said to both of them, I'm not really sure I want to do that. One was very supportive and was like, listen, if you change your mind, you call me. And another one absolutely flipped out. She's like, do you know how many people want this opportunity? What are you, nuts? And I just said, I don't think it's for me. back to my conversation, so this prof said to me, well, why don't you do like the internet thing? I'm like, what? How am I going to do that? And he told me the story. So he said to me that he was at a journalism conference one year and he met this guy who was a fairly high up media executive. And he asked him how he got into the business. And when he was a young kid in LA, and we're talking a long time ago, it was really the age of radio. He was a busboy in a restaurant, and a big radio star came in, and he asked the guy, you know, listen, I'm dying to get on radio. I'm dying to get on radio. How do I do that? What do I do? And the guy was like, well, it's really difficult. But, you know, there's this thing called television, and nobody knows really much about it. They'll hire anybody. I mean, maybe until you can figure out the radio thing, you may want to jump into television because it's like wide open. And this man later on became the creator of the Today Show, which is still a long-running American news program. And it made me realize that I was stuck in this traditional paradigm that I hadn't considered something that maybe didn't feel possible. And when I graduated school, very short term, I took sort of a PR job. But soon after that, the company who hired me to be the human Google for that one summer hired me. And then, you know, off I went.
I want to go back to your networking. You were networking as a young person. It's like pulling teeth for me to get my students to network. They're terrified of it. They're terrified of self-advocating.
Oh, yeah.
What can you tell them? First of all, tell us how early you started. Who was your influence for that? Just talk about your experience, please.
Yeah, well, I was quite young, so I was, you know, about 16. Now I have to full open kimono. My stepfather was an executive recruiter, and his job is basically to put people in jobs and spend all day looking at resumes. And so he was the one who said to me, he was the one who pushed it. He said, you know, oh, hey, I play squash with so-and-so.
And so you listened.
Yeah, well, I was like, this sounds really dumb and I'm nervous. He's like, no, you have to listen to me. I know people. If you're interested in this business. And he set up a lot of meetings for me. And I have to say, once you do one or two, you get over the hump of, wow, this is super weird and I can't believe I'm asking someone for time. It gets easier. And I would say the thing to remember, and by the way, my kids are exactly the same. You know, we'll say you should talk to so-and-so and so-and-so, and they're very reluctant. But we have to remember, and even just right now for me, this is very fulfilling. It's very fulfilling for someone to reflect on their own professional journey and think that maybe they might be able to contribute or influence someone else's.
Okay, Stephanie, I want to hear about what a typical day is in your work life.
Oh my God. Well, I don't have a typical day. That's probably why I enjoy what I do. I learned early on that I could not be in a job that was very predictable. Admittedly, it's chaotic sometimes. You know, some days I'll get the gift of some time, 1 or 2 hours of time where I can think. So it sounds ridiculous, but it is unusual to get that much time to think. And what my job is to think through, okay, I'm building this new website or app. What technology should it be using? What features should it have? How do I connect it to the rest of the business? How do I make money? Some of my time is spent doing that. Sometimes, you know, we'll be rolling out a new product. We are today. So my day begins with a go, no go call. Where we run through, okay, what are the issues we're still seeing? Because when you launch digital technology, it's never perfect. What can you live without? What can you put out the door? So it started that way. I had to make a call and decide whether or not we were going to go. And so the rest of the day will be spent monitoring how that rollout goes. Other days, it'll be a lot of education, especially of our executive, about digital. A lot of folks still are baffled, intimidated, kind of afraid of the space, don't really understand it. And as we need them to make really good decisions, I need them to understand some of the mechanics. And then I spend a lot of time coaching my team. So I have a really strong team who is very close to each of the brands. And I spend a lot of time now in this position, guiding, coaching, directing. What's interesting, when you get to my level, you go from doing to guiding and thinking. And it's a very tough transition, especially if you're someone who, as most of us are, like to know you've ticked off your to-do list for the day. When I was writing as a journalist, I'd be like, oh, good, I finished that article. Felt great. This, once you get more senior, you're actually coaching other people who are doing. And so a lot of my days is spent helping them strategize and helping them work through challenges that they have.
Okay, so what kind of work-life balance do you have?
I do have a personal life. I am married and I have 3 children. The job I have today is not a job, truthfully, I could have had when my kids were little. It would have been really difficult because, you know, for 4 years I ran news editorial and I was on call 24/7. I still am in a way, but it's nothing as intense as that was. So I think work-life balance is almost impossible. I'm just going to say it. I think that sometimes you're doing really well at one and not so great at the other, and then they shift.
Yeah.
And so I think people really need to cut themselves some slack in this department. I think what I do, though, to try and make sure that I'm creating space for myself and my family, I took up a meditation practice. That's twice a day that I do in my office and before work. I exercise in the morning and I eat really well. That may sound kind of ridiculous, but it's incredibly important for me to keep my health up and my energy levels for sure. But honestly, like, it's not realistic. Truthfully, my husband is also a very demanding job. It would be almost impossible to do it without help. With 3 children on top of it, I still feel very connected to my kids. I definitely, when I'm home for sure, but I'm not perfect. That's for sure. Now that they've grown up a little bit, I'm going to tell all you parents of little ones, all the disciplining and the modeling, because you are modeling at the same time, it pays off.
Now, Stephanie, what would you say is the number one skill kids need when launching into the real world?
That's such a good question. I would probably say, gosh, I can't narrow it down to one. Flexibility, agility, learn to bend. That's for sure. And then an incredible amount of self-esteem and positivity. You know, sometimes we move through the world and there's so much that we take personally that isn't personal. And certainly I know when you're entering the world and you're applying for jobs and you're going for interviews, each rejection or negative experience, it's so easy to take it personally and let it get you down. When most of the time, now that I'm where I'm at, I can tell you most of the time, those experiences, if you weren't picked or chosen, they're really opportunities where you can turn around and say, hey, listen, can you just give me some more feedback to help me get better? And often it really doesn't have anything to do with you.
So all of these things that we're talking about are soft skills. They're not hard. They're not marks or test results or courses you've taken. They're soft skills that any kid can develop over the course.
For sure. And I would say that the truth is marks and that academic standing, depending on what you're interested in, are important. In many cases, it is the only way you get a foot in the door. But once you get a foot in the door, so you need sort of those qualifications, once you get a foot in the door and I'm interviewing for positions, I'm really asking myself this question: is this an individual I can work with? a
Mhm.
lot. Is this someone who's going to be a team player? That's the leadership piece.
Mhm.
That is much harder to find and so incredibly valuable. Most things can be taught.
Yeah, great insight, Stephanie. Seriously. So helpful for our viewers. Now, I want to wrap it up. You've given us
Okay.
a lot of your time today, and I know you're busy. You've launched something, so we've got to get you back to your work. So, if you weren't in media, where would you be?
If I weren't in media, I will say I am exactly where I think I should be. Um, now that I've had my own experiences with mental health, I would probably, and I've thought a lot about it as my career evolves and I'm able to maybe give more time. I would probably be involved somehow in mental health and in particular dedicating to new moms,
Mhm.
young mothers, because I certainly struggled as a new mom and a young mom. And I think that I have a lot to offer in that community.
Mhm.
So I think that's probably, I was just thinking about it the other day. If I went back and I'd already had my fabulous media career, which I am really enjoying, yeah, I might consider that path instead.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much, Stephanie.
Oh,
This is
you're
a really
welcome.
nice conversation.
Thank
I've loved
you.
talking up with you today and hearing all of your stories. You've had amazing tips for us. I appreciate you
Great.
sharing. So thank
Good.
you very
My
much.
pleasure.
Take care. Thank you for joining us today. If you liked what you saw, give us a like, and even better, subscribe. Hope to see you soon.